echoes of the past. Marco, Nina and Rebecca approached the serene outline of a small island set in the middle of a tranquil lake. The island, covered with the remnants of what once might have been a thriving camp, looked desolate and long abandoned. As they surveyed the shore from the mainland, Marco decided to swim across to ensure it was safe before bringing Nina and Rebecca over. After a brief swim, Marco found a small boat hidden among the reeds on the island's shore. He paddled back and ferried Nina and Rebecca to the island. They stepped onto the island with a mix of curiosity and caution, scanning the remnants of what seemed like a last stand. The camp was a shadow of its former self, the structures battered and weather-worn, suggesting abandonment many months, perhaps even years ago. It was clear that humans had once thrived here. The layout was well organized with communal areas, sleeping quarters, and defensive positions. However, the signs of a violent struggle were unmistakable. Doors bore deep claw scratches, and broken weapons littered the ground. Yet there were no bodies, just the silent testimony of those who once lived there. As they delved deeper into the ruins, Nina discovered a stack of mouldy books and papers in what appeared to be the remains of a library or study area. Among these, she found an old, handwritten journal, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. She carefully flipped through the entries, which chronicled the daily struggles of the island's inhabitants against the relentless threats that haunted their world. The last entry in the journal caught her attention. It spoke of a small group from another camp, led by someone named Captain Knox, arriving at the island. The entry detailed discussions about a camp where vampires defended humans, hinting at a sanctuary unlike any other. Rushing over to Marco with the journal in hand, Nina exclaimed, "Look here, we must be on the right track." Marco took the journal, his eyes scanning the faded handwriting. "Yes, but how long ago was this? This place has been deserted for a long time, and it looks like something came through here, something angry. These marks are massive." Rebecca, who had been quietly exploring the perimeter, chimed in. "Captain Knox was the leader at our old facility. Maybe she found that base. Maybe she found the vampires." After a moment of thoughtful silence, Marco decided, "We'll camp here for the night. It seems safe enough, and we'll keep going in the morning." The trio settled in, taking refuge in one of the less damaged structures. As they prepared for a night's rest amidst the ruins, the silence of the island offered a deceptive peace, belying the turbulent and violent history etched into every corner of the camp. That night, as they rested, the weight of their journey and the clues they had uncovered settled around them. The past echoed through the abandoned camp, and the promise of answers lay just on the horizon. Unexpected reunion. As Marco, Nina, and Rebecca left the island, they continued their relentless search for the mysterious camp where vampires were said to protect humans. The day was long and scorching, the sun beating down unmercifully as they trudged through the underbrush. Exhausted, the trio finally sat down to rest under the sparse shade of a few scattered trees. "There's just nothing?" Marco sighed, frustration evident in his voice. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, Nina tilted her head, her expression changing. "Wait," she said, her voice hushed. "Do you hear that? Is that a motor?" The trio ducked down instinctively as they saw a vehicle in the distance. The faint sound of rock music floated through the air, growing louder as the vehicle approached. Through his binoculars, Marco could make out two people in the rebuilt vehicle. "Give me those," Rebecca demanded impatiently. She snatched the binoculars from Marco and peered through them. Without a moment's hesitation, she stood up and began running towards the vehicle, arms waving wildly. "Get down," cried Nina, her voice laced with anxiety. We don't know who they are." At first, the vehicle did not seem to notice Rebecca. Then abruptly, it stopped. One of the occupants pointed in Rebecca's direction. "Too late now," Marco muttered resignedly as he and Nina stood up. The vehicle edged closer, and Rebecca shouted with recognition, "Captain Knox! It's me, Rebecca!" The vehicle screeched to a halt, and a woman stepped out, her presence exuding a palpable sense of strength and authority. "Rebecca, I thought you were gone," said Captain Knox, her voice filled with surprise and relief. A man also exited the vehicle, a figure of imposing stature with broad shoulders, who offered a warm, reassuring smile. "This is Alex," Captain Knox introduced. "How have you survived all this time?" Captain Knox asked Rebecca. "I had friends," Rebecca replied, glancing back at Marco and Nina with a grateful smile. Captain Knox then turned to introduce herself and Alex properly. Marco seized the opportunity. "We're looking for a camp where vampires defend the humans. We need help." Captain Knox exchanged a knowing look with Alex. "We'd better get you back to camp. It's a fair journey, but this vehicle has handrails and somewhere to stand. We should be fine," she said decisively. "I'll explain everything back at camp." With that, the group climbed aboard the robust vehicle, the music resuming as they set off through the wilderness. The chance meeting had rekindled a spark of hope in Rebecca, and for Marco and Nina, it felt like a significant breakthrough in their quest. As the landscape sped by, each of them prepared for the revelations that awaited at Captain Knox's camp, where the complex web of supernatural alliances and enmities promised to become even more entangled. Under siege. As the vehicle neared the camp, a sudden commotion erupted just beyond the perimeter. About 20 undead, their eyes blazing with an unnatural fire, were launching a ferocious assault on the camp's defenses. "Let's lay low until the guards finish these off," Captain Knox whispered, motioning for everyone to stay quiet and low in the vehicle. From their vantage point, Marco and his companions could see the camp's guards springing into action. Despite the daunting appearance of the undead, the camp's defenses, reinforced with lines of shiny silver along the walls and barricades, proved formidable. The guards, equipped with weapons coated in silver, engaged the attackers. It was clear that these weapons, originally designed to defeat the Lycan, were now a crucial repellent against this new breed of fiery-eyed undead. Marco observed with interest how the silver barriers seemed to immediately affect the undead, slowing their advance significantly. The guards capitalized on this advantage, finishing off the creatures with precise strikes to their heads with the silver-coated weapons. Alex, noticing Marco's confused look, leaned over to explain. "Haven't seen these ones before?" he asked, his voice low. "They just started popping up everywhere. They can't be stopped in the usual way, but silver seems to be effective. They're still as strong as 10 men, but when they come in contact with silver, it seems to slow them down, and a silver strike to the head is lethal, but don't try to take them on hand to hand." After the last of the undead fell, the vehicle finally entered the camp, the gates shutting firmly behind them. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but relieved, as the immediate threat had been quelled. Captain Knox quickly arranged a meeting with key figures of the camp: Eleanor, the camp leader, Sarah, the engineer, and themselves. Marco, Nina, and Rebecca were introduced, and Marco took the opportunity to explain their mission. "We're seeking aid for our camp, overwhelmed by undead and elders," Marco detailed, his voice carrying a mixture of urgency and hope. Captain Knox nodded gravely, her expression serious. "If there's more than 100 of those undead at a time, we would be in serious trouble," she admitted, highlighting the precarious balance of their security. Nina, curious about the earlier discussion, asked about the vampires. What about the vampires that were said to defend the humans here? Alex responded with a somber tone. They are all dead. They sacrificed themselves to save us. We are alone here. The revelation cast a shadow over the group, underscoring the gravity of their situation. The meeting concluded with plans to fortify the camp further and explore potential alliances or strategies that could help them withstand the growing supernatural threats. As they dispersed, Marco, Nina, and Rebecca absorbed the stark reality of their new allies' struggle, realizing that their journey was not just about survival, but about forging a path forward in a world where old protectors had fallen and new menaces reigned. Unseen forces at play. How did you manage to get here? Captain Knox asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. The group sat around a sturdy table in the command tent, the air thick with the musty scent of canvas and the lingering tension of the recent undead attack. Marco leaned forward, his face etched with the fatigue of their long journey. We'd heard of your camp through rumors and set out for aid. We were captured by cannibals and managed to escape. Then a man in a shiny mask pointed us in this direction. A man in a chrome mask? Alex interjected, his brow furrowing in concern. Yes, Marco confirmed. I don't know for sure where he is now, but he was keen to meet the Lycans at our base. Captain Knox and Elena exchanged a glance that carried a weight of unspoken knowledge. His name is Winter, and if he's headed to your base, he'll either save it or destroy it. I don't think there's anything that can stop him, Elena said with a somber tone. Alex looked over at Eleanor, his concern evident. Do you think Winter can stop these new undead? Stop them? Elena shook her head slightly. I'd bet everything that he has something to do with them. His motives are known only to him, but I know one thing. The further away from us he is, the safer we are. Nina, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, suddenly interjected. But if he's at our base now, we need to get back and help them. Alex responded gravely. Nothing you can do could stop him. Of all the threats now facing our world, he is by far the worst and most powerful. Meanwhile, far away in a distant city that once thrived as a metropolis for the undead, where a once powerful necromancer ruled, a handful of undead began to stir. These undead had a fire laced in their eyes, a sign of a divine and sinister awakening. The air was thick with the essence of godly interference. Necros, the god of the undead, was building his army. His presence felt more potent than ever as he scoured the lands for his fallen kin. With each undead he raised, he instilled a portion of his divine power, reconstructing them in his image, strong, powerful, and terrifying. As the shadows lengthened and the night deepened, the world seemed to hold its breath. The actions of powerful beings like Winter and Necros were reshaping the landscape of power. Back at the camp, as Elena, Captain Knox, Alex, Marco, Nina, and Rebecca planned their next steps, the stakes were clearer than ever. The supernatural forces were not only clashing with each other, but were also drawing the humans into their vortex of power struggles and ancient vendettas. The question of survival was no longer just about fighting the visible enemies, but understanding the unseen forces at play. Resurrection and intrigue. In the desolate remains of what was once a bustling metropolis for the undead, Necros, the god of the undead, sensed a great presence, a follower potent enough to lead his burgeoning army. Yet, this promising leader was nowhere to be found within the vast, empty city. Necros, driven by a desire to harness this power, extended his supernatural senses across the sweeping plains that stretched beyond the city's limits. Suddenly, he halted, his focus sharpening on a distant location. With a ripple through the earth, he vanished, re-emerging not far from the camp where Ilana, Alex, and Captain Knox resided. Here the aura of the being he sought was unmistakable, powerful, and brimming with intelligence. Necros yearned to claim this formidable undead for his own ranks. Scanning the horizon once more, Necros pinpointed the exact source of the energy. Disappearing again into the ground, he surfaced inside a small house that had been converted into a makeshift laboratory. There, among various scientific paraphernalia, lay the severed head of Stephen Lestat, a renowned necromancer whose experiments had once sent ripples through the supernatural community. Despite the evident experimentation, the head remained eerily pristine. Necros, surrounded by a group of his newly raised undead, observed their reverence as they bowed before him. His gaze swept over them, selecting one without a moment's hesitation. With a swift, ruthless motion, he decapitated the chosen undead, its body crumpling to the ground. Necros then placed Lestat's head onto the fresh corpse. Uttering incantations in a language unknown to the living world, he watched as the body twitched and rose, now powered by Lestat's head, whose eyes ignited with a fire far more intense than any of the others. The necromancer had returned, now reborn as a servant to Necros, his eyes ablaze with renewed purpose and a sinister obedience. Meanwhile, in the shadows just outside a small safe house, Winter observed the night sky. He sat concealed, his presence nearly imperceptible, as he watched the distant flickers of supernatural activity. With a knowing smile, he muttered to himself, "Excellent. Everything is as it should be." Winter's cryptic words hung in the air, hinting at deeper machinations and a grand design that was slowly unfolding. The resurrection of Lestat and the movements of Necros were not mere coincidences, but part of a larger, more ominous strategy. As the supernatural forces continued to maneuver and align, the fate of the human survivors and their would-be protectors grew ever more uncertain, woven into a tapestry of power plays that promised to reshape the world. Divine bargains and ancient powers. At the undead metropolis, Lestat wasted no time returning to the laboratory. Empowered by Necros's influence, he resumed his work on biological and genetic enhancements for the undead. His previous experiments had failed him, but now, fueled by the godly energy, he felt a renewed vigor to pursue his ambitious projects. Meanwhile, back at the Elder's safe house, Elder and his followers had constructed a shrine to their vampire god. There, in the dimly lit sanctuary, Elder spoke the dark tongue of the night and shadows, a language that had not been heard for centuries. "You helped us before. We, your servants, beg an audience. The undead are being manipulated. They grow stronger each day. We need to build our ranks, but they are everywhere, aided by a higher power. We need help if we are to survive." In response to Elder's invocation, the vampire god appeared before him. His form was both majestic and terrifying, a being of immense power that seemed to darken the already shadow-filled room. "I know that Necros walks this earth, interfering in the affairs of mortals and supernaturals." The vampire god spoke with a voice that seemed to echo through the ages. "But his freedom to act comes from your own actions, Elder. You tapped into the undead's power for your own gain. We must not steal the powers of others." The vampire god then explained the delicacy of the universal balance. The more we gods interfere, the more fragile this balance becomes. Should it break, this world along with all gods will be destroyed. I dare not disrupt this balance further. Elder, his face etched with worry, responded, "And what of Necros? He is now free to gain the upper hand by empowering his undead. We need help, or we will cease to be. Would this not also disrupt the balance?" The vampire god looked at Elder thoughtfully. "Very good. I see why you have survived. You do not need more elders to win this battle. You just need one more. I will bargain with death. If it's at all possible, I will send him to you." Elder, his interest piqued, asked, "You mean the sage?" The vampire god replied, "Older than the sage, the first of the elders." He then named this ancient and powerful entity Azrael, the progenitor of shadows. Elder stood in awe at the possibility of Azrael's return, the very thought of such a formidable ally invigorating his spirit. If Azrael could be persuaded to join their cause, the balance of power could shift dramatically in their favor. As the vampire god vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, Elder and his elders were left to ponder the implications. The promise of Azrael's involvement not only provided a glimmer of hope, but also a deep sense of the challenges that lay ahead. They knew that the path forward would be fraught with peril, but with potential aid from such a legendary figure, they might just stand a chance against the rising undead force led by Necros. Divine conspiracies. In the deep woods, where nature's heart beat strongest, the essence of the Lycan god mingled with the earth and the trees, sensing the delicate fabric of the world being stretched and torn. As the most powerful of all supernatural gods, with the closest connection to the natural world, it felt a profound disturbance in the balance that had governed the planet for millennia. This divine being, woven into the very essence of nature, felt an overwhelming concern for the future of the world, a world teetering on the brink of irreversible destruction. The Lycan god, with its immense power, could sense the pull of forces darker and more desperate than any it had encountered before. It was a force that was not merely reacting to the chaos, but seemed to be driving it, manipulating the gods and their supernatural followers into accelerating the collapse of the global balance. As the Lycan god searched for answers among the whispers of the wind and the murmurs of the earth, it detected an interference, a deliberate manipulation that was almost imperceptible. Something, or someone, was forcing the gods to intervene in ways that they normally would avoid, pushing the balance ever closer to the brink of destruction. Why would such a force seek the unraveling of the world? What ends could possibly justify such catastrophic means? And who, or what, could possess the power and knowledge to influence the gods themselves? These questions hung heavily in the air, unanswered but increasingly urgent. The woods themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game of divine chess. As the Lycan god contemplated its next actions, far from being resigned to despair, it prepared to rally the other supernatural entities. It knew that if they could uncover the puppeteer behind this dangerous manipulation, they might stand a chance to restore balance and prevent the impending doom. Stay tuned for the penultimate episode of Crimson Dawn Season 2, Part 9, where the mysteries deepen and the fate of the world hangs in the balance. Who is manipulating the supernatural forces, and can they be stopped before it's too late? The answers to these questions promise to reshape the future of the world as we know it. Origins of a genius. Before the world knew of werewolves and the undead, before the apocalypse tore through the fabric of society, Simon Winter was already shaping the future with his groundbreaking work. A pioneer in the field of electromagnetic brain science, a discipline he himself had founded. Winter's intellect was unparalleled, his innovations far beyond the norm. In the quiet sanctum of his private laboratory, Winter's research into Alzheimer's disease was both personal and profound. His superior knowledge in the manipulation of electromagnetic fields around the brain had led to the development of revolutionary therapies and diagnostic tools. His work, often described as decades ahead of his peers, focused on the neurodegenerative processes that robbed so many of their memories and identities. But it was at home where the true depth of Winter's motivations lay bare. Caring for his wife, whom he affectionately called Mara, Winter found his greatest challenge and deepest inspiration. Mara, once vibrant and full of life, now struggled with the onset of early Alzheimer's disease. Each day, he watched as the woman he loved slipped further away from him, her moments of clarity fading like stars at dawn. "I will soon be able to stop this, my love," Winter said softly to Mara as he adjusted a delicate array of sensors around her head. He had been refining a new process, initially tested on himself, to clear neural blockages and enhance cognitive function. "I've used a new process on myself to clear away any blocks in my own brain. It has given me more clarity into how the brain works. Each and every day, I seem to clear out the parts that are useless and unlock more and more of my potential. I can see how to cure you." Mara looked up at him, her eyes clouded with confusion. At first, she did not recognize the man who had been her partner for decades, but as the moments passed, a flicker of recognition sparked in her gaze. "Simon," she whispered, a smile slowly forming on her lips. Winter hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of hope. His experiments had not only expanded his cognitive abilities, but had begun to offer a glimpse of a potential cure for his wife. Yet, what Winter did not yet fully understand was how these enhancements to his own brain would later influence his actions and decisions when the world fell into chaos. The same technologies and techniques developed to heal were soon to be repurposed for survival in a world dominated by supernatural threats. As Winter continued his work, the lines between his past research and the future apocalypse began to blur. The tools and knowledge crafted for medical breakthroughs would soon become instrumental in navigating and shaping a new world order, where the boundaries of science and supernatural forces were inexorably intertwined. The unfolding genius. In the depths of his private laboratory, Simon Winter was engrossed in a series of self-experiments that extended far beyond the conventional boundaries of medical science. His therapy, a complex electromagnetic treatment designed to unlock neural pathways and enhance cognitive function, was not only intended to save his beloved Mara, but also aimed to revolutionize the treatment of Alzheimer's disease for the world. Winter's therapy was predicated on the theory that the human brain, typically utilizing a fraction of its potential, could be stimulated to operate at significantly higher capacities. Conventional wisdom and scientific consensus suggested that humans only tap into about 10% of their brain's potential capabilities. This figure, often debated in academic circles, wasn't about the physical percentage of the brain used, but rather its functional capacity in everyday tasks and thinking processes. As Winter applied his breakthrough electromagnetic techniques to himself, he began experiencing a profound expansion of his cognitive abilities. The treatment was unlocking parts of his brain that had lain dormant, pushing his brain's usage to an unprecedented 30%. With this increase, Winter's perception and understanding of biological systems deepened extraordinarily. At a 30% brain capacity, Winter's cognitive enhancements manifested in several profound ways: enhanced memory and recall. His ability to store and retrieve information became almost limitless. He could recall intricate details from decades past with ease, aiding his research and experimental designs. Accelerated problem solving. Winter found that he could solve complex scientific problems that had previously eluded him. His ability to model and predict biological pathways accelerated, making his work on Alzheimer's more promising than ever. Heightened perception. Winter began to notice details in his environment that he had previously overlooked. This heightened sensory awareness allowed him to make connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. Advanced learning ability. He could absorb new information at an astonishing rate, learn in languages, understand in advanced texts, and synthesize in new concepts quickly. Increased creativity and innovation. With more of his brain active, Winter found himself thinking outside conventional scientific paradigms, leading to innovative approaches that would normally be dismissed or unconsidered. However, these enhancements came with unintended consequences. Winter's increased brain function also altered his emotional processing and empathy. He became more detached, seeing problems and solutions in a purely logical way, which affected his interactions and emotional connections with others, including Mara. As he pushed the boundaries of human cognitive abilities, Winter did not fully grasp the transformation he was undergoing. His singular focus on curing Alzheimer's obscured the broader changes in his psyche and personality. This increased brain capacity was reshaping him into something beyond the ordinary, setting the stage for the pivotal role he would play as the world around him descended into chaos with the emergence of supernatural forces. Winter's journey into the expanded capabilities of the human mind was just beginning, and the consequences of his unprecedented cognitive enhancement were yet to unfold fully, leading him into realms of science and supernatural interactions that were previously the domain of fiction. The cataclysm and the cure. As the world descended into chaos with the emergence of werewolves and the undead, Simon Winter remained sequestered in his laboratory, obsessively focused on curing his wife Mara from the cruel clutches of Alzheimer's. His breakthrough was monumental, a device capable of rejuvenating the brain by clearing blockages and optimizing neural pathways. The potential to restore Mara's memory was within reach, and Winter's excitement was palpable. However, fate intervened in a most disruptive way. Just as he was about to finalize his treatment, government agents stormed his laboratory. The apocalypse had forced the government's hand. They needed Winter's unmatched intellect for a different purpose. With werewolves and the undead overrunning cities, they compelled him to develop a weapon against these supernatural threats. Relocating Winter and his ailing wife to a high-security underground bunker, the government dictated the terms of his research. In this new, stark environment, Winter reassured Mara, his voice a blend of warmth and mechanical precision. "I will cure you, Mara. The plans are complete in my mind. This new base is a setback, but we will overcome it." Mara, her cognition waning under the dual pressures of her disease and the upheaval around them, recognized him less each day. Winter's new creation, an electromagnetic device designed to revitalize the brain's functionality, was nearly operational. Alone in their quarters, he initiated the treatment on Mara. As the device hummed to life, Mara's eyes began to clear, recognition flickering within them. "Simon, where are we?" she murmured, a trace of her former self surfacing amidst the confusion. "Be still, my dear," Winter replied, his voice steady but laden with urgency. "This last part is delicate. One wrong move and—" At that moment, the base shuddered under the impact of an external assault, likely an attack by the undead or rogue factions, and the power flickered out. In the engulfing darkness, Winter's anguished cry echoed, "No!" When the emergency lights flickered back on, the tragic sight that greeted him was Mara, motionless on the bed, the treatment incomplete, her life seemingly extinguished. Winter's response was chilling in its detachment, his emotions suppressed by his heightened cognitive state. He immediately returned to his workbench. "The problem of power must be solved," he muttered to himself, his brain now functioning more as a supercomputer than a human mind. In the solitude of the bunker, with his wife's lifeless body nearby, Winter's genius twisted into something new, a tool not just for saving lives, but potentially for ending the supernatural menace that ravaged the world. His emotions buried deep beneath layers of logic and enhanced cognitive processes, Winter began to devise a plan that would not only run his medical devices independently of external power sources, but also turn the tide of the supernatural apocalypse, escape and resurrection. Winter's days and nights blurred together as he tirelessly worked on what the government agents demanded, a weapon to turn the tide against the supernatural entities that now roamed the world. Yet, for Winter, this weapon was inseparable from his original mission to cure Alzheimer's. His brain capacity, constantly evolving and expanding due to his self-administered treatments, enabled him to see connections and solutions that remained out of reach for ordinary minds. As Winter finalized his designs, the realization dawned on him that his most powerful creation was not something he could physically construct. It was his mind itself. The government, driven by desperation and fear, failed to see that their greatest weapon was the genius they sought to control. Winter, ever the strategist, refused to hand over his work, understanding all too well that the government's intentions were self-serving at best. When the agents, frustrated and anxious for progress, decided to lock Winter away in a high-security cell within the bunker, they underestimated his capabilities. The facility, already strained under constant threats of raids and assaults by various factions, soon fell victim to a major incursion. Amidst the chaos, Winter made his calculated escape, leaving behind the intricate plans for the so-called weapon. He knew that to anyone else, deciphering his work would be akin to an ant contemplating quantum mechanics, utterly impossible without his level of cognitive function. Unbeknownst to the agents and the raiders, Winter also took something priceless with him, the body of his beloved Mara. In a new hidden location, he painstakingly rebuilt his laboratory, determined to continue his work. With his profound knowledge of cryonics, he preserved Mara's body in a state of suspended animation. "Death is not the end," he whispered to her serene, ice-enshrouded form. "But to bring you back, I will need a certain power, a power that transcends what even I have achieved so far." In the solitude of his new sanctuary, Winter set about the next phase of his grand plan. He needed to harness or develop a power that could defy the natural order, a power potent enough to resurrect the dead. His thoughts often drifted to the supernatural forces he had learned about, wondering if perhaps the secrets to such power lay with the beings that now dominated the apocalyptic landscape. As Winter worked by the dim light of his lab, his mind raced with possibilities. Each theory and hypothesis built upon the next, his incredible brain capacity weaving together strands of science, a supernatural law, and his own groundbreaking discoveries. Somewhere within this complex tapestry of knowledge lay the key to Mara's return, and perhaps to altering the course of the supernatural apocalypse itself. Transformation of Winter. As Winter delved deeper into the arcane and obscure texts of supernatural lore, his brain, already supercharged by his self-administered treatments, absorbed information at a breathtaking pace. His capacity for learning and comprehension had surpassed any known benchmarks, allowing him to grasp the complex and often contradictory nature of supernatural laws that governed the creatures of the night and the undead that walked the earth. However, with every piece of ancient knowledge uncovered and every supernatural phenomenon understood, Winter's frustration grew. The power he sought to emulate, the power to resurrect Mara and possibly alter the very fabric of reality, seemed tantalizingly out of reach. His mind raced through calculations and theories, but the stark realization dawned on him. There was no known scientific or magical means to replicate such formidable powers. In a moment of profound introspection, Winter stood in front of a mirror in his secluded laboratory. The reflection that stared back at him was both familiar and alien. The face of Simon Winter, the renowned scientist, passionate about curing Alzheimer's, seemed like a mask hiding the extraordinary entity he had become. The brain behind that face had evolved so far beyond human norms that it was no longer fitting to associate it with his past identity. Speaking to his reflection, his voice carried a mixture of resolve and mourning. This face will not be seen again, only by Mara, when she again lives. Until that time, Simon Winter is dead. Now only Winter lives. This declaration marked the shedding of his old identity and the full embrace of his new persona, driven not by human emotion, but by a cold, calculating intelligence aimed at a singular goal. In the following days, Winter set to work on crafting a physical representation of his transformation. He constructed a mask made from a polished chrome metal, meticulously designed to fit his features. The mask was not just a shield to hide his identity, but a symbol of his new self, reflective, impenetrable, and enigmatic. Whenever Winter looked at his own reflection, he would see the infinite, a constant reminder of his boundless intellect, and the eternal quest that now defined his existence. This chrome mask became Winter's new face to the world, one that no longer bore the vulnerabilities of Simon Winter, but projected the formidable presence of Winter, the being who transcended human frailties and peered into the abyss of supernatural powers. With this new identity, Winter was ready to step out from the shadows of his hidden laboratory and interact with the chaotic world outside, a world where supernatural forces clashed in an ever-escalating battle for dominance. Winter's journey had taken him far beyond the realms of science into something much darker and more profound. Field test. Winter, now donning his reflective, chrome mask and equipped with his advanced weapon, a fusion of science and his ever-evolving mind, decided it was time to test the limits of his new capabilities. The weapon was not just an apparatus, it was an extension of his intellect, controlled partially by his thoughts and the intricate mechanisms he had devised. Venturing into the ruins of what once was a bustling area, Winter encountered a group of undead shuffling aimlessly. With a mere gesture of his hand, a wave of energy pulsed from his device, and the creatures collapsed onto the ground, lifeless. Too brutal, he muttered to himself, dissatisfied with the lack of finesse. His goal wasn't just destruction, but control. Continuing his journey, Winter came upon another group of undead. This time, he adjusted his approach, focusing his mind and weapon to manipulate rather than obliterate. With concentrated effort, he commanded them to halt. The undead stopped in their tracks, frozen in time as if caught in an invisible snare. "At any moment, I can end them," he observed, pleased with the precise control. "But let's see how it works on the werewolves." Winter's quest led him next to a small pack of Lycan. Hidden under the cover of dense foliage, he targeted the group, tuning his device to their unique brain patterns. With his unmatched skill in electromagnetic manipulation, he attempted to seize control. The werewolves halted, frozen momentarily by Winter's intervention. "Easy," he whispered with a hint of arrogance. However, as he delved deeper, trying to infiltrate their minds more intrusively, he encountered an unexpected resistance, a barrier that blocked his access to the deeper, cognitive layers of the Lycan. Winter's smile broadened behind his mask. "Got you," he said quietly, intrigued and challenged by this new obstacle. Later that day, back in the sanctity of his laboratory, Winter sat deep in thought. "It's there, but I cannot access it fully. I need a direct connection," he spoke aloud, his words echoing off the cold, hard walls of his secluded workspace. This realization marked a pivotal moment in his research. The barriers he faced with the Lycan suggested a level of complexity and protection in their neural architecture that was unlike anything he had encountered in humans or other undead. Winter knew that overcoming this hurdle could unlock even greater potential in his quest for control, and perhaps even for resurrecting Mara. His mind raced with possibilities: neural interfaces, direct neural manipulation, advanced biotechnological integration. Each idea flowed into the next, his thoughts a torrent of innovation, spurred on by the challenge. As he prepared for the next phase of his experiments, Winter was not just a scientist or a widower driven by grief. He had become a force of nature himself, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in a world governed by supernatural laws and human desperation. In the dim glow of his laboratory, Winter gazed at Mara's preserved form, her serene face encased in the cryonic chamber that held the promise of their reunion. He spoke to her as if she could hear him, his voice a soft murmur filled with resolve and a hint of impatience. "Soon, Mara. Very soon. I see them now. The players in this grand game of power, but there are moves yet to be made before I can act decisively. First, I must ensure the humans survive a while longer. They are key to tipping the balance. Only then can I access the power I need to bring you back. Work it shall, my dear." Winter's plan was not just about revival or power. It was about restoring a balance that had been severely disrupted by the forces of supernatural entities vying for dominance. His understanding of these forces had grown immensely, and he knew that manipulating these dynamics was essential for achieving his ultimate goal. Fast forward to present times, Winter stood atop a desolate building, overlooking a ravaged cityscape. Below, a group of undead marched, their eyes blazing with an unnatural fire, a stark reminder of the chaotic world that now existed. Winter watched them intently, his chrome mask reflecting the eerie glow of their eyes. "The time is near," he whispered to himself, a slight edge of excitement in his voice. "One more push." Winter's mind was a whirlwind of strategy and anticipation. He needed to catalyze a final event that would shift the power dynamics dramatically in his favor. This push involved leveraging the ongoing conflict between the supernatural factions to create a vacuum of power, one that he could then fill using his advanced technologies and newfound abilities. Back in his lab, Winter returned to his array of monitors and devices, each one displaying data and simulations of possible outcomes. His fingers danced across touchscreens, adjusting parameters and running predictive models. With each simulation, he edged closer to the perfect scenario that would enable him to intervene decisively. As Winter orchestrated his plans from the shadows, the world outside continued its descent into chaos. Supernatural creatures battled in the streets, unaware of the puppet master who was slowly taking control of their fates. Winter knew that each skirmish, each conflict, brought him closer to his goal. With Mara always in his thoughts, Winter's actions were calculated and precise. He was no longer just a scientist or a grieving husband. He was a player in a much larger game, a game that spanned the realms of the living, the dead, and those in between. As he prepared for the final act of his grand strategy, Winter remained confident that he would emerge victorious, not just for his sake, but for Mara's as well. The Edge of Revelation, coming soon in the gripping finale of Crimson Dawn Season 2. As the intricate web of Winter's plans unfolds, the very fabric of supernatural power is tested. The gods, ancient and powerful, find themselves at a crossroads, influenced by Winter's unprecedented machinations. Is Winter truly capable of swaying the divine balance that has governed the cosmos for eons? Or will his ambitious schemes provoke a celestial backlash that could unravel the threads of existence itself? Humans, long seen as mere pawns in the eternal games played by gods and monsters, may hold a key unforeseen by the supernatural entities that seek to use them. as the plans of a genius forged in tragedy and brilliance come to light, the true nature of humanity's role in this cosmic drama will be revealed. Are they merely victims of a greater game, or do they possess the potential to tip the scales in a battle for their own destiny? Moreover, the mysterious rescue of the Alpha by Winter raises profound questions. Was this act merely a piece of a larger puzzle, a move calculated for its effects on the supernatural hierarchy? Or was there a glimpse of the old Simon Winter, motivated by empathy and a sense of justice, beneath the strategic surface of his actions? As the finale of Crimson Dawn Season 2 approaches, these questions loom large, promising answers filled with power, betrayal, and the potential for redemption. Watch as the narrative threads, woven through intense battles, dark alliances, and the quest for power, converge in a climax that will define the future of every creature, mortal and divine, in this haunted world. Stay tuned for the ultimate showdown, where the fate of gods, humans, and the resurrected forces of darkness will collide. Will Winter's ultimate plan succeed, or will it unleash consequences beyond his control? Find out in the explosive conclusion of Crimson Dawn,